Welcome back to the UK Property Market Stat Show, week 42. My name is Chris Watkin, and this week we are joined by Richard Durrant. We'll come to Richard in a second. The UK Property Market Stat Show is a YouTube show looking at the UK property market. There's an awful lot of stats out there that measure what's happening in the property market, the stuff like the land registry and the stuff from the nationwide or banks and building societies like the Halifax. Yet an awful lot of that data is between 2 months and 9 months out of date. By looking at what's happening in the UK property market this week, we can actually find out what's going to be happening to those indices in 2, 6, 9 months' time. By looking at the number of properties coming on the market, we can see how supply and demand is doing. We can see whether prices are being reduced. We can see how many houses are selling and whether sales are falling through. The show itself is split into 3 sections. The first bit is talking about the national picture. Then we spend a little bit of time on the regional stuff where you can actually download the stuff and compare it with your town. And then finally, we end up on a city or a town and look really closely at that particular location, comparing and contrasting the different estate agents. And this week, we are focusing on Chelsea. I'd like to introduce our regular guest to the show, Richard Durrant from the Relocation Agent Network. What he doesn't know about estate agency isn't worth knowing. He's a switched-on guy, and he's a bit of a data geek like me. Richard, thanks for joining us this week.
Morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. It's a bit rainy today. It's Thursday, the 26th of October, so this will be coming out tomorrow. And we've got some beautiful stats. I know you love your stats. So,
Chris, before we start looking at the stats or facts, as I call them, just a quick question. You've obviously been out and about, and I saw you at the Esters last week. What's the general feel from agents? You know, putting aside what the stats may or may not tell us, what's the general view? How's the feeling?
Well, it's interesting you use the word feeling there, Richard. At the end of the day, humans have 2 sides to the brain. They have the factual side and the emotional side. And what I've noticed is this, is that there seems to be a polarization of estate agents in the fact is that there are some estate agents who are finding the current market really hard work. And there are some estate agents who are actually really, really enjoying it. Now, the Esters is probably a little bit of a self-selected, you know, they're the winners. So the feeling in the room at the Esters last week, which anyone who's not an estate agent, the Esters is like the Oscars, one of the 2 or 3 biggest estate agency awards and conferences. The feeling in the room was really, really upbeat. But again, they're winners. They probably had a few lager shandies. But even before the alcohol touched their lips, the general feeling is in that room that things weren't that bad. But there are, if you look at the social media and certain Facebook groups, there is a feeling from other agents that it's really hard work. And I think it's the classic glass half full or glass half empty, and it's mindset. And, you know, it is hard work. We, as a estate agent, you know, the last few years has been very much order taking estate agency. And now we actually have to work for our money. So I think the general feeling is, in a nutshell, is there's a polarization between the ones that seem to do well or getting better and the ones that are finding it hard work and finding it even hard work, Richard.
And Chris, I'm sure we'll go on to talk about it a bit more during the show, but do you think this has got anything to do with sort of an experience gap? So I don't know, in my opinion, a branch manager has probably got 4 years experience, maybe a bit more, but most branch managers will be offered that position at 4 years. What I'm certainly seeing is the businesses which are owner-led, and what I mean by owner-led is they are on the coalface, doing the valuations, having the negotiation conversations, all are reporting really strong business. Yet the businesses which the owner of a business will not be in the branch on a day-to-day basis are suggesting it's a really tough time. And is that because the branch managers and the listers haven't worked in a tough market because we haven't had one for 10 plus years?
Well, those of us with slightly grey hair or receding hairlines will remember the times of 2008. Some of us with even more grey hair can remember the times of the 90s. I became an estate agent in 1993, and those years of 93 to 97 were almost doldrum-like, where you had, you know, you had hundreds of properties for sale, and you were still only selling 20 or 30 a month.
And they were all in negative equity. I joined in 96, and we had a portfolio of properties where you weren't talking about a £5 price reduction because they got 50 grand equity in the property. Every single property on our books was in negative equity, and it was how much of a hit they were prepared to take.
Certainly, and I think it is, it is those area managers who have been through a tough market. It is your responsibility to teach your guys and girls. For the last few years, structured vendor calls and vendor management has not been existing because the houses were selling. It's getting back. I know it sounds so boring, but getting back to basics of, if the valuer overcooks it slightly to get it on the market, what are you doing? Not after 12 weeks. What are you doing after 3 or 4 weeks to get the price down? Have you got a structure? Have you got a clearly defined structure on your vendor calls? Are you actually making those calls? It's boring and dull work, but at the end of the day, it's jobs that need doing.
And I think it's also,
Go on.
I think it's also having the right people doing the right job, isn't it? And when I say that, are you sending out your Saturday viewing assistant to do the second viewing on the house with a not on market local vendor who's second viewing the property? Who's even taking the offers? Because there's one part of the negotiation of the offer, who's putting forward the offer, but actually who's receiving the offer? Should there be a process where somebody phones up to make an offer and I say, I'm going to ask Chris to give you a call back because he's dealing with that property. And therefore, when Chris has that initial conversation about the offer, he will glean all of the relevant information.
Absolutely bang on. Probably let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit later in this chat and let's go and have a look at the stats. Well, as always, we start with listings at the start, and quite frankly, on this one, there's no surprises here that there are 30,684 listings this week. Actually, I'll whiz through the figures, and then you can wax lyrical accordingly. So here we go. So this is our listings this week, and the pink line on the graph. Those that are listening on the podcast, you can download the charts that I'm mentioning in the write-up on the podcast. And the first graph we're looking at is national weekly listings. The pink line is this year, and then the orange lines are 19, the turquoise 18, and the greeny color is 2017. As you can see, listings are slightly starting to drift off because we were in the mid 30,000s, and now we're touching 30,000. But again, that's in line with what happened in 17, 18, and 19. Richard, we'll give you an overview in a second. Listings year to date, 1.368 million. The average listing price, £421,000. And this week's listings, as I said, 30,600 compared to 31,500 same week in 22. And again, those are all the rest of the figures that are on the graph. Richard, thoughts on listings?
I think it's a bit surprising when you're speaking to agents that the listing numbers are where they are. I think if you look at that chart, it's like a child's tracing, isn't it? The pink line is the guidelines, and occasionally it's going offline, but ultimately it's following exactly the same pattern.
It's a very strange thing to say, but if those people are coming for looking some weird and wonderful stats, I mean, listings are very, very important. Back in 2008, everyone dumped their houses on the market and listings went through the roof. It's so important to keep an eye on these listing numbers, because this is what's going to tell us if everyone dumps their houses on the market, then there'll be too much supply, and general economics will show that prices will come crashing down. That's just in line with 17, 18, or 19. Sorry, Richard, carry on.
So I think ultimately that's a positive week. There's nothing there. There's nothing setting alarm bells off.
No.
I
mean, the average for the last running month is 31,500, and as I said, this week it was 30,600. So again, there's nothing, as I said, nothing absolutely scary. Year to date, again, all in line. Interestingly, notice 2021 list. I always thought that was I would have thought there was more listings, but there weren't, because there was a shortage of supply, wasn't there? And the average price we'll come on to in a bit later, but 421 is more in line. Whilst we're talking, let me go and find that graph. Here we go. Here's the graph, which the yellow line is the average listing price, and the pink line is the average asking price of a property that becomes sold subject to contract in that week. And this was the jump that took place after Easter bank holiday. And that gap got really wide, but noticing she's leveling back up and she's being a little bit more sensible there. So the average price of a property coming on the market this week, 421,900. The average price of a selling property, 356. Anything else on listings before we go
Chris,
on?
so on that list, on that sort of listing price against sale agreed price for last one you had up there, the gap, looking at the graph, the gap seems to be in line with where we were at the beginning of the year, and I think the media's probably helped that slightly. I think we've got vendors who are being realistic, and we've got motivated vendors. I don't think we are in that sort of 2001 market where people were chucking their house on the market saying, if I get £500,000, I'd move. And ultimately they'd get £500,000. So I think from an agent's point, listing numbers are strong, but I don't see a widening gap between listing price and average sales price.
No. Interestingly, I've got some stats which show the average pound per square foot on sale agreed price. And that is really interesting, because we have actually, when I say we, my friends at 20EA have matched the pound per square foot on the completions. And what is particularly interesting is that, so obviously that is all the land registry figures. And then instead of just looking at a price, we're doing pound per square foot. And what is interesting is that is actually, it has been slightly increasing over the last couple of months. Really? Yeah, not much, a couple of percent. Now, remember, that is in nominal headline terms, not in real terms. In real terms, house prices are coming down in price, but in nominal, they are going up. But I mean, if inflation's at 10% and your house price going up by 2%, in real terms, it's dropping by 8%. But it's headlines, and again, most people don't understand the difference between nominal and real. So as long as they're going in the right direction, people seem to feel happy. Very strange, but never mind. Notice curious folk, as my mum would say. Should we move on to price changes?
Yep.
Okay. So price changes. Let's have a look. Where we go. Hold on. Okay. Right. The number of price changes this week is 23,384, which is bang on line with the monthly average of 23,800. And the average number of properties price changed 20,346. That's the average for the whole year. That means that we are reducing about 14.6% of our properties at the moment every single month. And the average price of a property being reduced is, let's just pull that back up again, is, hold on, there we go, 397,423 pounds.
Chris, if you look at that sort of national price change, and appreciate we're up by 14% on a week-on-week sort of average. This time of year, from memory, was always which vendors were motivated to move. And when I say move, I don't mean complete, but I mean get their property under offer before Christmas. And there was always some robust conversations in October, which says, in order to get moved or sold before Christmas, we need to look at your price. So whilst we're down on a week on week, do we know where we sit against this week sort of over previous years?
What, numbers wise?
Numbers wise.
Okay, so again, let's just go and have a look. So I'm going to pick 2018, and the average number of properties being price reduced this week 42. Well, we'll just do a month either side. The average number of properties being reduced, and remember, in 2018, the number of properties for sale was pretty similar to what it is today. 21,082, and you can see here that it's 23,000. So it is up slightly. Just to give you an idea of the number of properties that are for sale, let me just pull this map up here. This is the number of properties that are currently for sale. So this is total number of properties. Oh, hold on, say that again. So you can see that there. So that is the number of properties that are for sale in the UK by month since 2017. And you can see here that we always have the dip down in January. So there's the Christmas dip, and there's the January dip. Interestingly, there's the 22 dip. but she comes up and oh, there's the 19 dip as well. So she goes up, she always dips around January. There was the 22 January, but interestingly, look at that growth that we have seen there. I mean, again, there's that growth there that we saw after lockdown 1. Now, interestingly, here's a graph, which again, I was going to save till later, but it's appropriate to talk about it now. This is the growth of listings by region, Rich. You haven't seen this before. And the average growth of listings in the UK is 193%. But isn't it interesting that inner London is only at 126? Okay, Channel Lines we have to take with a pinch of salt because it is a small place, but the Southwest, 250.24% more. There is a huge difference there, isn't there?
And do you think that's is that a result of lockdown and second homes, and it's a lovely part of the world, and are people firstly looking to move there, but also the current occupants actually going, we can probably make some money here. We know there's a real demand for our type of property from people moving out of the cities. Let's try it.
I mean, I don't know the answer. What I do know is this: listings, the number of properties for sale in inner London and outer London was higher than normal, because in London we've had people trying to sell, we have the issues with the apartments, and there's been an awful lot of apartments on the market that haven't been shifting in London, so that's kind of affected the marketplace. So that's why the growth in London is not so great. There seems to be a tonality of, the northeast, the northwest, southeast around 200%, but then we've got East Midlands at 232 and the southwest. I mean, anecdotal evidence suggests that a lot of people moved out to the southwest and are pulling their horns in and coming back to the cities. Whether that would actually make it one of the biggest, I think, as I said, take a pinch of salt with the Channel Lines because it's so small. That's what I think, but I've got no evidence to back that up. Okay, I don't know. But it is interesting, I think, that is the growth. Should we get back to, let's get back to, we've done price reductions, so we'll go on and look at gross sales. So in terms of gross sales this week, we have sold in the UK 21,247 properties, which is a lift from last week at 20,500 and the week before 20,600. And again, this is the magic, is that the average number of properties sold per week this year has been 21,736. So, okay, it's not like it was in 2021 when the average number of properties selling per week was 27,352. And I think it's all about perspective, is that if you're judging yourself on your 2021 figures, then of course 27,000 sales is a hell of a lot less than 15,000. But when you consider the average number of properties selling, and there you go, this is a week in isolation, we're not far off sale agreed wise. I think we're about 94% off, if memory serves well. I've got this when I post this on Property Industry Eye tomorrow, I'll have worked out the figures. But we're about 90. Just to give you an idea, Richard, we're about 99% on listings compared to 17, 18, and 19. We're about 94% on gross sales compared to 17, 18, and 19, and we're about 89.7% on net sales compared to 17, 18, 19. Why are we comparing 17, 18, or 19? Well, 20, 21, and 22 were pretty strange years. So we have to take those with a pinch of salt.
And I think we're guilty of letting the exceptional become the expected, aren't we? So ultimately in 2018, if you'd have asked most agents, would you happily carry on this volume for the next 10 years of your life? Most people would have said, absolutely. We're now sat here 5 years later, disappointed that the levels, which seem to be in line with 2018, are the levels we're seeing.
Yeah, and again, I think this is an important graph, is that don't panic when sales start to drift off. And you can see those lines on this graph now, that the red line 19, the white dots, sorry, the red dots 19, the white dots 18, and the yellow dots 17. They will start to drift off as we go into November. So don't panic, ladies and gentlemen, when you get to and your sales are curtailed. It's part of the natural market. Gross sales year to date 912,000. As I said, it's about 94% around there of the 17-18 figures. The average price of a property selling, we've touched on this earlier on, was £356,000. So I must stress to you, ladies and gentlemen, we're not saying that if an average property is coming on the market at 421, it's not selling for 356. It's just that the bigger price properties have a lower propensity to sell. So those are selling are lower price, which is going to drag the average down. The gap between the two, we'll just have a quick look at the gap now. I've got some graphs on those. The gap this week is 18.5%. The long-term average gap between listing price, average listing price, and average sale price is running at 16 or 17%. Okay, so interestingly, in the last few weeks, she has been touching 37%. Especially 37%, that big week where we had that, if you recall this graph here, I'll just bring it back. Hold on. Where is it? Hold on. There we go. Hold on. Wait. There we go. There, that was a huge gap where we had a 37% gap, but we're now back to 20s. I'm happy when it's in the teens, late teens, start to get slightly uncomfortable when it gets over 25. Jump in. I'll come back to, let me just bring up back sales. Thoughts on, hold on 2 seconds, missing about here. Do apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Any thoughts on this?
I actually think it's fairly encouraging. I think that without the stats, people would suggest the market's worse than it is. I think we're just seeing it's in line. I'm fairly surprised that 356 isn't lower. Because we're actually up on most years. Agents are reporting bigger price reductions, reducing by at least 5 to 10%. We're not seeing that number here.
No, I mean, it is interesting that the average sale price for a property has remained very, very static. I mean, the year to date weekly average is £357,316. And that what is really weird is, and again, we'll just have a quick look at this graph here. Look, it's really tight. It's been as low as 330 and has been as high as 370. That is really tight. You know, that what's here. I mean, the listing price, it's all over. It's like a roller coaster. Okay, let's move on and look at fall throughs. So that's the raw numbers. The raw number of fall throughs this week is 5,700 exactly, which is slightly more than last week at 5,400. Week before 5.8, week before 5.7, the week before 5.8, the week before 5.7. I think a more important percentage is the percentage rate. So this week we were at 26.83%. The long-term running average is 24.3%. Interestingly, look here, 40.5% fall through rate last. We could, you know, to some agents that's a distant memory, but that was the effect of the quasi-quartile budget. 40.5% of your sales, and we'll just bring that back. Look here, up here. This is the ignore the Christmas spike, but we have to put it on. But that's where we were last year. Look, that's where we are now. Thoughts on this?
Look, I think we're in line. I think if you ask most agents who have done the job for the last 10, 15 years, guess what would you suggest a fall through rate is? I think they're going to say somewhere between 20 and 25%. So yes, at 26%, we're ever so slightly over, but I think it's in par with most people's business models.
Well, it's interesting. You talk to some agents and they'll say a third. I mean, to give you an, as I said, the long-term average is 23.3 and the year to date is 25.7% year to date. Okay. Right, let's move on to net sales. So ladies and gentlemen, net sales is the number of gross sales this week less the fall throughs from your sales pipeline, which gives a net sale figure. Okay, the number of net sales this week is higher than last week. So last week it was 15.2, the week before 14.8, the week before 15.8, and the week before that 14.9, and then 14.9 again. This week we're at 15.5, and so it's up on last week's. It's not bad, is it?
No. Again, that one's fairly surprising. That the pink is slightly lower than the previous years, but ultimately, if you looked at the last couple of the last couple of weeks, we're on a sort of upward trend, where in previous years, at this moment in time, we're always on a downward, aren't we?
Well, again, let's look. I think the white line on this UK resi net sales graph is more and more. I think we should compare ourselves to 17 to 19. And I find it fascinating that we are almost matching the 19. Again, we are presently at 89. Well, I'll just show you. Here we go. 89.7%. Now, ladies and gentlemen, last week that figure was 90.5. There was a mistake in that graph. I do apologize with regard to the way I dragged my spreadsheet across. So that last week at 90.5 was a slight mistake. That should have been 89.9 if memory serves well. So apologies on that, ladies and gentlemen. But this week, 89.7. So year to date, net sales 683,661, which is 89.7% of the 17, 18 or 19 average. That is the number of net sales. Again, look at how the effect of 22 when there was only 11,000. But again, we are off the 17, 18 and 19. So again, let me repeat. We are at roughly 99% on listings compared to 17, 18 or 19. We are at 94, 95% on gross sales compared to 17, 18 and 19. And we are at 89% on net sales compared to 17, 18 or 19. So listings are okay. Gross sales are a bit lower, and net sales, so we're having slightly higher fall throughs. Anything else you want to say on this before we move on?
No, I think it's about agents managing their own expectations, looking at their business plans. If we're going to be at 90% of the sort of historic numbers we're comparing to 17, 18, what are you doing within your budgets? Are you increasing fees? Are you listing more? What are you doing? I think there's plenty of ways around it. I don't think we should take that 90% in isolation. There was a phrase we used to use, and we certainly didn't make it up, but we stole it. But there is never a bad market for a good business.
Bang on. At the end of the day, I think estate agents, you shouldn't be worried about house prices. At the end of the day, what you should be worried about is, are you getting your fair share of listings at decent fees? And I think the magic is what are you doing to get those fees up? We will come and look at that a little bit later when we look at Chelsea. So even if you're not in Chelsea, do listen to that, because we're going to show you a bit of kit which will prove that you get slightly higher. If you're good, you've got to be good at it, get your higher fees. We'll just spend a few little stats that might be of interest to you. The price changes as percentage of listings. Again, the long-term average is 42%, but this week it was 76, which shows that estate agents really are working their stock. And gross sales as a percentage of listings, again, slightly below, but as you would expect, because listings are at 99 and gross sales are at 94. Yeah. That's again slightly below. But again, if you're remembering and reminiscing the good old days of 20 and 21, when you were selling basically 93% of what you were listing, of course it's going to feel bad. It's all about mindset. Okay. Now we showed this graph last week, but again, in case you didn't see it last week, you were on holiday. This is the level of agents' pipelines by unit numbers. The turquoise lines are all the Septembers. So you've got something to contrast about. And again, isn't it interesting that the pipelines at the moment are approximately 6 or 7% higher in September than they were in 17, 18 or 19. Again, it's all about perception, isn't it?
I was just looking at that. We've got higher pipelines than we've had since 2020. Now, there's an argument which is saying properties are taking longer to go through and the pipeline's taking longer to churn. But ultimately, if the sales numbers and the gross sales numbers are only dropping slightly, that's going to come through and result in revenue. Indeed.
Some other bonus graphs for you, ladies and gentlemen. Number of rental properties that are available by region. So this first one, there's two versions of this, because it looks like a custard slice here. You can't see individual layers. But the red line here is inner London, and the yellow line is the southeast. What particularly is interesting is look at that absolutely massive growth when everyone flooded out of London in the first lockdown. Yeah. So, it went from 70,000. So there was doubling number of stock, and then slowly she's been coming down. So what is particularly interesting is if you actually look at the average rents in London, average rents plummeted in 20, and they are now only 9% higher than they were. What happened to, and I think I showed it a few weeks ago, the average rents are only 9% more than they were in 2018. Because in 18, at the peak in 18, and then we had a little bit drifting down, and then we had the slump in 20 where everyone put their rentals on and the prices dropped like a stone. And the net effect between late 18 and now is only 9%, but it's people's perception. Let's just look at that same graph here. That's the same graph without the southeast and without the inner London. And again, just a general drifting off of stock in the order around 30.
And I know you can't get this data. So what would be really interesting is how much of that is because people are staying in their tenancies for a longer period of time. So the relets aren't coming to market. So what proportion of the relets are now no longer in this data because people are staying for 24 months, 36 months rather than 12 months?
I think anecdotal evidence suggests, I've got stats from the Office of National Statistics that, even though the headline rents are growing at, say, 12%, the net effect is around 3 or 4, because the Office of National Statistics look at existing rents as well as new rents. Now, what's happening is an awful lot of people are looking in the market saying we can fancy a move, and the move isn't an extra £100 a month; it's £200 or £300 or £400 a month. So people are stopping still. Now, interestingly, there's a lot of spotlight on landlords whether they're selling or not, and the stats are as follows: that there's always been landlords selling. So let's use nice round numbers. Up until probably 2017, 2018. For every 100 properties that were coming on the market for rent, and for the first time they were bought as for buy-to-let landlords, 80 were leaving the rental market because landlords were getting up to their 60s and 70s and offloading because they'd done. So the net effect was 100 in, 80 out. Letting agents were happy because the net effect was a general growth of around 20%. How do we know those figures? We've got the stamp duty receipts from purchases, and we have the capital gains receipts and the stuff coming out the other end. We now look at the stats at the moment. What we're finding is that the 80 has now gone up to about 145. Okay, this is landlords selling. So the number of landlords selling up has almost doubled. So again, if we're using the same numbers, the selling has gone from 80 to 145. Now, what is particularly interesting is that if you ask most letting agents, are landlords buying buy-to-let properties, what do you think most would say, Richard?
I imagine they all say definitely not.
That figure has only gone down 22%. So the 100, so before you had 100 buying and 80 leaving. Now you've got 145 selling and about 80 buying. But the net effect is 140 out, 80 in. The net effect is a loss. And agents judge the buy-to-let market on their net properties under management, when in reality, landlords are still buying. They're just not
Chris,
so much.
I also think we're guilty, and it's very easy to sit here not doing the doing anymore and criticise what agents may or may not be doing. We've worked with a business which have really grown their lettings book, and if you look at all their lettings revenue, and if you look at what they're doing is, they are not. I think we're guilty of Mr. or Mrs. Landlord says, I want to go to the market and sell. And all of the negs go, this is brilliant. I've got 200 first-time buyers who'll buy this property. They chuck it on the portals and they sell it to the first-time buyers. The best agents are going, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord, let's not go to the market. Let me speak to my investors who will be of a big benefit to you. Firstly, they'll take the property with a tenant in situ. Secondly, it's not an emotional decision. They're buying it on a spreadsheet, essentially. And thirdly, we know they've got a really big deposit because they're getting a buy-to-let deposit or they're paying cash. Therefore, the best possible buyer is a landlord. Let me go and sell it to one of my landlords, and they will sell those properties. I think we're guilty of just chucking them onto the market and then being upset that our managed portfolio numbers are dropping.
You're so bang on. And I think if you're a neg watching this and a landlord's thinking of doing that, don't whack it over to the sales department, because all they're interested in is their commission. Just think on and think globally. Go and speak with your boss and let's see if you can sell an investment package to someone else. Right. That's just a bonus graph that we showed last week, but some of you might not have seen it.
Chris, sorry, just one point on that, and I know the numbers don't necessarily marry up, but if the rents have increased 9% since I think we said 2019
in a London,
in a London, and I'd imagine that's probably increased in the UK as a whole. You know,
it's not been as been a bit smoother than that. London was a bit weird, but go on. I mean, that graph there shows you UK rents. Okay. The orange line that you can see on the graph now is average rent. So, I mean, you know, if you take the peak there in June 20, then the average rent was 1,500 and now it's 1,800. So therefore, that is a 20% growth, to late 17, 18 off the top of my head growth. So there is still a growth. If you go from the bottom there, it's even bigger, but that's rents. And then the blue lines are new properties coming on the market for rent. Sorry.
Yeah, my opinion is, as a letting agent, that there's a number of ways, but there's two real ways you can increase your revenue if we're not talking, or increase your profit if we're not talking about cutting cost out. And that's more landlords, which I think we know are hard to come by, but if you've got a strategy in place like we just talked about, it's easy to do. Or it's increasing revenue per landlord. And ultimately, if we're seeing a growth of rental value in our portfolios, how many agents are sat on a portfolio where they haven't done a rent review for the last 2 years because the property's out of its fixed term tenancy and it sits in the CRM and it doesn't come up as a reminder? Go and increase your revenue by 9% by upping your rents by 9%.
You are absolutely so bang on there, mate. And again, just, you know, I think we get too sucked in on the day-to-day problems of leaky roofs and all that, when in reality, our job, if you're just doing that, you're just a glorified rent collector. Your job is to look after the landlord's management. When was the last time you sat down with your landlord and had a review on your property?
And Chris, what I think the best agents are doing, and I know one agent, single branch agent, who's just added 70 grand's worth of revenue by looking at their prices, they're treating it as if it's a new valuation. So I think we are all guilty at the point of renewal going, hi Chris, Richard here, spoken to tenants, they're really keen to stay, we think you should increase the rent by £25, £50 a month. And the landlords may go, oh, yeah, that's fine, or they're a really good tenant, don't worry about it. What the best agents are doing is they're going out with market comparable reports and saying, if I was listing your property today, I'd be increasing the rent by £200. Let me go and speak to your tenant. And providing the same evidence to the tenant to justify.
And again, you're not doing the tenant any favours by keeping them on an artificially low rent, because there'll come a day where you know, if you're on a cheap rent, there's going to come a time when reality, you know, they'll go and spend it on other stuff. You know, it is a business, and I can see it from the point of view of the tenant. But at the end of the day, this is a business, and you as a landlord, you know, you don't have to go rack rent and go stupid, but that's what's causing an awful lot of problems at the moment. As you know, Richard, is people have been artificially holding their rents back because they've been a good tenant and been looking after the house, and all of a sudden they go into the open market, and the next jump up is not 50 quid, it's 300 or 400 quid. And we're all guilty of, when our wages rise, our expenses tend to rise with it. And
would that solve potentially a bit of a retention issues we're seeing as an industry? So we're all losing landlords. Actually, if your landlords were getting market rent or potentially slightly over market rent at the moment, because I think you can inflate it, would they still be leaving in the volume that they're leaving? And it's, I don't know the answer, but I would suggest probably not as many.
That's an interesting rhetorical question. Right. Let's move on. So what we're now going to do is spend no more than a couple of minutes looking at the regional stats. These, all the charts that you see today, ladies and gentlemen, are available to download. If you're listening on the podcast, there's a link in the write-up. If you're watching this on YouTube, you scroll down to the bottom of the description. There is a WeTransfer link, and you can download these in high resolution, because you won't be able to see them particularly well on the YouTube show. And you can look at them. All the graphs are available on, you are not to use them on social media without my express permission, but I'm more than happy for you to use these on valuations, to show vendors what's happening in the property market. I'm more than happy for you to take it out on laptops and things like that. So please do feel free to download those and use them on your valuations and internally. So the rule of thumb with these charts is that there is green is good and red is bad. And we split it up into the regions. We're not going to spend long on these. You can download these to your heart's content. Isn't it interesting, though, that the colors all tend to go in the same direction with regard to the region? So there isn't one region that's doing anything weird. And again, we've looked at the regions in terms of gross sales as a percentage of listings, sales that fallen through, price changes by listings, and net sales as a percentage of listing, with the cumulative years to date on the net sales, gross sales, and listings. Have a look at those. As I said, on YouTube, you can't see those particularly well. So the purpose of those is to download them and have a look yourself. Okay, Richard, anything to say before we move on and go to Chelsea?
Let's look at Chelsea. You really have been working hard. That's a big improvement, Tris.
Cheers, mate. Cheers,
Love it.
Right then, so ladies and gentlemen, we are going to Chelsea, SW3, and let's pull up the stats and go and have a look at it. So right, hold on. So the first bit of stats that we're going to pull up are using the 20EA Insights platform. The 20EA platform is a fantastic bit of kit. I genuinely believe it is a game changer, and it shows you as an estate agent, if you are getting a higher price or selling more houses, it really does show that. Now, I'm not being paid by 20EA to say it, but it is an absolutely fantastic bit of kit. And if you're a great estate agent, this proves that you can get higher fees. Do check them out. As I said, don't mention my name. I'm not on commission, although I bloody well should be. But I'm a massive fan of it. The other that we're going to use is a bit of kit called Bricks and Logic, and they use property data to actually then lay it on a map. And again, great bit of kit that doesn't cost an awful lot of money, and you can use this in your social media, pardon me, to prove that you know what you're talking about. I mean, just to give you an idea, let's just have a look at this. Again, not being paid to use this, but do check them out. I mean, you know, this is SW3 here, so between Westminster and the Boltons here, above the Serpentine Park, and you can just look at where the percentage of properties are. You can have a look at what's been happening to rents change in the last year, and you can do the last 5 years. You can mess about with this to your heart's content, and then put that into some social media. But I'm just a huge, massive fan of Bricks and Logic. Let's go and look at the stats, though, in terms of the agents in. Here we go. Are you ready, Richard? You've been here before. So let's kick off. So we are looking at the 20EA platform, and we're looking at the number of new instructions that have taken place since the 1st of January 2021 to the 25th of October 2023. And in terms of new instructions, it looks like there are, well, that's interesting. John D. Wood seemed to be the biggest agent by market share with regard to new listings, with 9.3%, 9.5%. Knight Frank at 9.3%. And what we can do is just have a look at their market share growth and just see how each agent is performing. So look, John D. Wood's been batting around between 5 and 15%, so they're not growing, they're just pretty static. So is Knight Frank. Let's look at Savills, slight uplift there. Foxtons, about the same. Interesting, Foxtons have really been pulling their socks up on the listings. I don't think you guys... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, obviously, sort of 2002 or end of 2001, they had a sort of strong period, and then they've definitely dropped for an extended period of time. So the original Foxtons getting back together and changing their marketing plan is clearly working.
It is working in inner London. I'll give them that. Their listings. I mean, I do a countdown of I've done a countdown of the top 100 estate agents by sales, and they really have picked up their socks. Drawn up their socks and cracking on with it. I don't know if that's a phrase or not. But it appears that the Chelsea Foxtons office doesn't seem to be following suit. Let's look at Dexter's. Okay, so there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of change between the agents. Oh, well, hold on. Russell Simpson, you seem to be growing slightly. Douglas Gordon, Again, they're dropping off. So that's the number of new instructions. And again, we can just keep playing with these. Let's find a country, Harrods. Okay. So I mean, the smaller numbers are going to have more spikies.
Yeah.
But again, interesting when it comes to the sales. So let's just have a quick look at the sales. So John D. Wood at 9.4. Let's see what sales that they have had. 14%. Well done, John D. Wood. So 9% of the listing, 9.48% of the listings, and 14% of the sales. So well done, John D. Wood. Knight Frank, 9.3% of the listings and 11% of the sales. So well done on that one, guys. Savills, 7.62% of the listings and 9.8% of the sales. So again, the bigger agents are selling a higher proportion of the properties. I find that particularly interesting. In terms of so those are listings and sales. Okay, let's move on to stock levels. So, no, actually, we'll move back. Let's look at. I always like to look at the upper quartile because, and it's, you know, so isn't it interesting? So the average, bloody hell, mate, this is a lot of money. Let's just go back to listings. Hold on, excuse my French. So the average value of a property that's come on the market in SW3 since the 1st of January 2021 has been 2.5 million. Let's just have a quick look and see how that has changed. So 2.4 in 21. Let's go and look at, see if that's changed in 22, 2.5, and then this year, 2.7. Okay, so let's go and look at the upper quartile. So if there's been 3,333 properties that have come onto the market in the last 2.5 years, then the upper quartile is going to be, well, we're going to need a figure of about 750 on that. So let's go and click on this, on the prices. Okay, I'm happy at 3 million. So the upper quartile in Chelsea is 3 million plus. So let's see who the daddy agents are. Knight Frank seem to be the big boys here, along with Savills and John D. Wood, and Russell Simpson. We've not seen him before. And then some small, and Struts as well. Go on.
If you looked at that sort of top 9, obviously Foxtons have dropped significantly, but if you sort of said to anybody who you're going to sell, who you're going to use to sell your property in the top sort of quartile, your posh property, you're going to say Knight Franks, you're going to say Savills, you're going to say Struts, you're going to say Hamptons, you're going to say Fine and Country, and you're going to say John D. Wood in that particular area. So to me, no huge surprises there. Russell Simpson, and I don't know Russell Simpson brand too well, but they seem to be doing very well as well. And I've seen a spike.
They seem to be growing. So let's just have a look at the sales. So it looks like Knight Frank's market share is dropping in the upper quartile. Savills all over the place, but okay, we need to have a look at that a bit more. John D. Wood, about the same. Russell Simpson, they're growing. Well done, Russell Simpson. Stratton Parkers. Okay, if we just ignored that.
Yeah,
okay. Hamptons growing. Fine and Country. Guys, I think you guys could do a bit better. Chestertons. Okay. Foxtons in the posh range. Okay, looks like they had a couple of weeks there. But again, one swallow doesn't make a spring. Yeah. Tedworth property. Again, we're getting on small numbers here, so it's going to be a bit strange, but interesting where we are with those. Let's move on and look at stock levels. So the stock levels are, so the blue color is 21, the yellow is 22, and the red is 23. So you can quite clearly see here that Chelsea, you know, we talked about the level of new listings growing. Yeah. Well, that was on Inner London. Well, listings, stock on market was, or listings, which obviously new instructions make stock. The growth wasn't so great, and isn't it interesting here that let's do the full month of September, that in 775 properties for sale in September in Chelsea, 684, which again, it used the rest of the UK it's gone up, and then 821. So 821 versus 775. That is not a huge, in most of the UK, 50% more properties for sale today than 2 years ago. So
And Chris, what's interesting there? So you could gauge that two ways. If you looked at September, there are more listings today on the market than there were in the last 2 years. Where are we on new instructions? So is it that instruction levels are at the same volume and we're not selling as much, or is it actually we're seeing new properties come to the market and instruction levels are up, and therefore we're in a really good place in Chelsea, especially with a £6 million price?
Right. Well, okay. If you can see the bar chart there, that is the number of new listings that are coming on by each month. The dark is 21, the yellow is 22 and 23. So in Chelsea, there's not so much. Isn't it interesting that in July, look at the difference. This is, again, really, really interesting for those who are data geeks like me, is in the rest of the UK, July and August does not drift off. In the last few years, it's just been a normal market. Yeah. This year, which is a bit more of a normal market compared to last 2 years, has been normal. Look at that drop. It looks like every estate agent and every homeowner in Chelsea goes away to Provence.
That's exactly where they are.
I've never seen that. We're on week 42, ladies and gentlemen. We've never seen that amount of drop. So obviously, that is the classic everyone goes away on holiday look. And isn't it interesting? Look at the September figures. Remember, we had on the graphs earlier on where we had a big jump of posh houses. Well, it's all the people in Chelsea putting their houses on the market, Richard, isn't it? Okay.
This graph resembles what agents, and certainly in my tenure, used to say that actually January will be quiet. It will then die during July and August, and it will die again during December. And actually, over the last 5 years, we haven't seen that trend at all. We've been fairly stable throughout the year. This is exactly how I remember speaking to vendors about the market 20 years ago.
Old school estate agency, ladies and gentlemen. Well done, Chelsea. Right then, let's move on and look at the Omni competitive landscape. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this, you can actually get this free of charge from 20EA. It's called their 20EA Insights platform, and you can have your stats for 3 postcodes free of charge for I think a few months, free of charge. And you can download this. If you want more, then you go to them and give them some shekels. It's not a lot of money, but I must stress to you, I'm not on commission. I just love the platform and what it offers estate agents. And what I would say, ladies and gentlemen, again, Richard, you know what's coming up now, so I will apologize in advance. You've heard it before, but some of you in Chelsea won't have done this, but there's some data in this chart here, which is going to be absolutely amazing for some estate agents and not so for other estate agents. Now, what I find fascinating is let's ignore new instructions and let's ignore sold subject to contracts. Let's ignore fallen throughs and price changes. If you might just want to have a quick look at the price changes and fallen throughs, if you don't mind, whilst I'm just giving this eulogy from my soapbox, Richard, while I just do this. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're an estate agent, your job is to sell a house, obviously, but how many houses, for every 100 houses you put on the market, how many of them do you actually exchange and complete on? Which fundamentally is the most important metric that I believe an estate agent should do. Obviously, we're not talking about sale price and a close to, well, you know, that goes without saying, but the bottom line is, do you actually get the job done? And these 4 particular columns here, exchanged and withdrawn, are where the gold is. If we're in Aussie opal hunters or gold diggers or whatever that my wife loves to watch, trash TV, but we love it to bits. The bottom line is that there's some gold in here, because the only way a property will leave an estate agent's books is either she exchanges or she withdraws. So Knight Frank, for every 100 houses that they have put on the market, have left their books in the last year, the 20EA platform states that 31 have exchanged and 79 have withdrawn, which means their exchange ratio is 28.1%. The average in Chelsea is 30.06%. So if you put your house on the market in Chelsea, you have a 30.06% chance of moving, exchanging and completing. But look at the difference between the estate agents here. John D. Wood, you have a 41.9% chance of exchanging. Savills, 44.5%. Foxton's, 18.5%. Dexter's, 40%. Chesterton's, 27%. Russell Simpson, 10.4%. Stratton Parker, 43.7%. Hamptons, 48.65%. Farrer, 26%. JLL, 58%. Douglas and Gordon, 34%. Maskell's, 41%. Winkworth's, 15.7%. Chapelton's, 25%. Marsh and Parsons, 21%. And Druce, 33%. And Bective, Leslie Marsh, also at 33%. That is a massive gap. And this is the wonderful thing about bits of kit like this software, is that you can go to someone's house and show people how successful you are actually getting the job you get paid to do. And again, if anyone's got any queries with regard to these stats, then please do contact 20EA and highlight them to them. But this is the gold standard when it comes to data, in my humble opinion. All the big estate agents, especially the agents that you're seeing here, most of them have this bit of kit. And if they're not, your boss is not showing it to you, then ask them for it. Yeah, pretty big gap there, Richard, between exchange ratios, wasn't there? Normally they're a lot tighter than that. I mean, go on.
Normally they're a lot tighter. Occasionally, when they've got 4 transactions, the number will be distorted, but there's normally a very tight gap between it. In the UK, Chris, and all the towns you've looked at, what would you suggest the average exchange percentage is?
It's presently running at about 58%. 58.
That was my gut feeling. So there's nobody from memory, apart from somebody who may have just done a handful of transactions. I think JLL. There's nobody even at 50%, are there? But the average is at 31%. So what's happening in Chelsea that means?
Well, London is slightly higher than Chelsea. It's around 40, early 40s going off memory. I haven't checked for a few weeks, but it doesn't change that much. London has a lower propensity to sell. Yeah. You know, if you go up north, for every 100 houses you've got on the market, you'll probably expect to shift at the moment 60 to 70 of them. In London, you would expect to shift about 40 of them. In the posher areas, that number goes down. The magic is to compare yourself with apples,
yeah,
and compare yourself like with like. And that's why I love this bit of kit from 20EA, because it enables you to compare yourself against other agents on the same football pitch. Interestingly, let's just spend just a couple. The number of properties coming on the market in the last 12 months compared to the number of properties coming on the market 12 months before that is 10.3% higher. So if your listings are lower than 10%, that means you're not keeping up with the market. Yeah. Interestingly, Dexter's have grown their market share by 49, Russell's at 45, Knight Frank at 26. And then we've got Douglas and Gordon at 52. Again, we have those issues with those, and it looks like they're coming around now, which good luck to them with James and the team there. This particular is quite an interesting graph. So what I'm doing here is, you can see in the top right-hand corner, it says this year or last year, and you can see, so the x-axis across the bottom is the number of properties putting on the market, and the y-axis going up is the average price selling. So you can see that Russell Simpson do sell the posher houses. So again, I must stress to you, the exchange ratio on Russell Simpson is going to be lower because the posher houses don't sell as much. So do take that with a pinch of salt, ladies and gentlemen. And it looks like Stratton Parker, but then again, Stratton Parker have got a decent exchange ratio. So maybe some work there for you guys at Russell Simpson. And again, you can see here that looks the biggest move we said, you know, Dexter's doesn't like Dexter's is, oh, here we are, Dexter's. So there's Dexter's moving out there. So number of instructions going up, which as we said was 49%. Knight Frank doing well at 26. You can see the planet moving there. Savills not moving so much. And then Douglas and Gordon, where's Douglas? They're not on this map, but they are going backwards, bless them. Hopefully you can get that turned around. Any thoughts on the fall throughs and price changes on these?
No, what's interesting, Chris, from a sort of shared learning perspective, is I was with an agent last week who has seen a marked increase in fees and are averaging, not just saying it, are averaging 1.5% in a really competitive market. And I said, how are you doing it? And they said, we're using 20EA stats to show what the likelihood of our competitors are of reducing the prices, sales falling through, and what we're exchanging. And we are going out.
Graph here.
Which is this graph here, which is, and I'll paraphrase slightly, we will sell your house. We will sell your house for the price we are. We'll sell your house. We'll exchange on your house. and will exchange on the price of a value we're telling you, because here's the data that tells us, tells you what we're going to do. You can instruct us now at 1.5%. If you come back to us in 6 weeks' time, our fee's 1.75% because there's a lot more work. But they're using this to demonstrate, firstly, they're the most likely to exchange, but they're also the least likely to reduce the price.
Bang on, mate.
And as a consequence, they are, to a degree, sort of giving the vendor an ultimatum, which is, I can prove I'll get you a high specifiable price, but if you're going to go with somebody else first, I'm going to charge you more second time round. What risks do you want to take?
I like that. I'll probably even say even more, actually. Right. And that is this graph here, this chart here, ladies and gentlemen. You can see why I said this is game-changing stuff. Okay. Now, interestingly, the next one is looking at what do you actually achieve for the house? And what actually happens is, again, lots and lots of data here, and we need to split this down. Just spend a few minutes on this. Okay, so what we're looking at here, ladies and gentlemen, is this column here. So 20EA have looked at all 113 listings, and they've done the same for everyone else. And they've done an automated valuation model on the price, a bit like a Valpal figure. And then looked at what you've actually put it on the market for. Okay, so Knight Frank have looked at the price, and their asking price, they've put it at 0.4% below what they think it's worth. Again, London is a pretty weird market, so we'll just love it just to squeeze down to the bottom, and you can see that the average is. Apologies, ladies and gentlemen, there. I just had a power cut, so it cut out, and the power's come back on a few hours later. So I'm just going to finish the show. We've only got a couple more minutes left. So we're just going to have a quick look at how quickly houses are selling in Chelsea. Interestingly, 138 days compared to the UK average of 50 days. That is quite a lot. And compared to the year before, where it was 139 days, and as I said, this year it's 138 days. You can quite clearly see here with the blue line which agents are taking longer to sell, and then how long they're taking through to get to completion. So new instructions sold with the contract, you can see here. Okay, so Farah and Co seem to sell the quickest, Hamptons, then Chesterton's, and then you've got the sale agreed to completion times there, and then the total number just there. Quick look at the list with regard to the rentals, and you can quite clearly see here that Foxtons are the big agent with 10% of the market. Obviously, they bought Douglas and Gordon's book, so that's going to pump their numbers up slightly. With Chesterton's in second place, Knight Frank, John D. Wood, Savills, Drakers are there. We haven't seen them before. Benham Reeves as well is in there. So you can see an awful lot there in terms of the number of properties coming on the market in the last 12 months compared to 12 months before that. We've seen a growth of 3.1%. Interestingly, Marsh & Partners have put more houses on the market. 4.1% of houses are under rent with online estate agents compared to the national average of 13.7%. Most of that made up of open rent. Interestingly, open rent only 3.7% of the market. So thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Richard, for what you did during the show. You'll be watching this afterwards, and we look forward to seeing you next week, week 43, where I'll have another special guest on what's happening in the UK property market. Thank you very much.